So we are now ready to continue and create the actual work of art, the painting of cherry blossoms. I have my piece of paper ready to go. Of course, this one is a little bit bigger than the thumbnail that we created. But this knowledge, I'm going to keep this to the side and keep it handy because I'm still going to practice my tone. I don't want to waste paper, so I'm going to practice my tones on this. And one thing that I'm going to need is some gray tones to create the branch that the blossoms are going to go on to. So I'm going to do that and show you what color you're going to need before I show you how to use the branch. Okay, so I would just paint, I'm going to grab some black and just paint some gray tones on. And I want to make sure that the color that I have loaded in my brush is a nice dark tone. Okay, the brush that I'm using right now is a little bit bigger, but if you don't have different size brushes, you can use the same brush. It's just going to take you a little bit more time. Okay, and whenever I show you this technique, you're not just drawing the line, the direction of the branch, you're actually filling in the space and drawing the thickness and the body of the branch. So if you do have a thicker brush like this, you want to maybe place it in a way where it makes the thicker lines where the base of the branches, and then turn it to make the skinnier branches. Okay, so you might want to practice that technique as well, how to use your brush to make the different widths of the branch as it's growing out, creating the fractals of the branch. A fractal is a smaller version of the original. The branches look a whole lot like the tree that they're growing out of, so that they would be considered as fractals of the tree. That's a little math for you. Okay, so if you have a little difficulty or you're not comfortable with making a branch, I'm going to show you a cool and fun and easy technique on how to create a branch. What I have here, I have this little contraption that I created. It holds things in place. And I created this contraption actually for this project, and I have some in my classroom. If some of you have had me before, you've used them. But this holds the branch in place and it holds it up off the paper. Now I have a nice light source, and I'm just going to place this branch, and I'm just going to use one right now. And if I feel like I need to use, I got these branches from the yard. Okay, they're small branches, easy to handle, and they have nice little offshoots just to fill the space nicely. Okay, so I am going to clip that in place, and I'm going to see how it places a shadow across my paper, and I think that'll be good to do. Okay, and what I'm going to do is get that color, that gray tone that I had in my brush, and I'm going to follow the shadow and just fill the space in. And I might need to pull it to the side to see how dark it's getting. I probably want it to be darker, but right now this is just kind of sketching on the paint. And what better way to make a natural branch than to use the actual branch for the shape? And if you practice, you understand the natural way that a branch grows. So if you do attempt to draw it on your own, you're already familiar and possibly more comfortable. So you'll be able to draw a more realistic branch. This helps you study how a branch grows. And if you want, you can go outside and just maybe trace the shadows from a tree. That's a fun thing to do. But for this project, it's good to have a small branch. Okay, so I'm just kind of sketching on using a dry brush. So there's not a lot of paint in this, not a lot of water in this, but enough paint so it shows up. And if I feel like it needs to be wetter, I'll just add a little bit more water to it. Okay, so I'm just gonna kind of pull it to the side and see how that looks. All right, I like that. Okay, and I'm going to switch to another one, or I could maybe possibly turn this in a different direction, but I think I'm just going to get another branch. So I grabbed a few branches from my yard, and I definitely want to make sure this is up off the paper. So this is a nice one. Okay, so I'm just going to fill up my space with another branch. I don't want just one branch in there. I definitely want to fill it up so I have plenty of branches so I can paint plenty of blossoms coming off the branch. Okay, so I now have my branches ready for painting blossoms. I didn't paint all the little offshoots of the branch because I wanted plenty of space to put the blossoms in, and then if I need to fill it with the branches, more branches, I can. I also need to leave space for some leaves that I'm going to paint in as well. So to go back to our thumbnail, I want to apply, and these are about the size of the blossoms that we're going to apply to the branch. So I'm just going to paint multiples kind of in clusters. If you look at our reference image, you can see that they grow in clusters. So there would be quite a few. We're not going to paint this many that you see in this image. If you wanted to, great. There's so many in this image that you don't see any branches really. And if I was to tackle a real painting that I would do as a more professional artist, I would try this. I would want to try it. But since you are beginners, I'm going to make it simple and easy for you to get your first try at this. So I'm going to put this back to the side. And I want you to look at our practice thumbnail. We're going to think about how the direction of the flowers are going. We don't have to paint the whole flower, as a matter of fact. We can paint just 2 or 3 and not leave or not paint the middle in. We can kind of change directions, and I'll show you how to do that, or if you need to practice on the thumbnail, you can. But it's pretty simple. It's just painting the blossoms without the center and painting them to the side, so you wouldn't see all 5. You would only see like 2 or 3. And that's pretty simple and easy thing to do. But I'm first going to start with a full face on blossom like we did in our thumbnail. And I'm just going to find a general place like here in the center. And I'm going to show you in the same way that we did on the thumbnail. And I'm just out here between these 2 branches here. I'm just going to place my finger, and I'm going to have my thumbnail here ready and available because I'm going to test my tones. And I've got my paper towel to the side so I can clean my brush out. I'm going to make sure that my brush has a nice amount of watercolor already in it, but it's still good to test and see. And I just wiped it out off onto my paper towel, so I need more. Okay. So I am going to do the same technique. This is, of course, for beginners, and the better and better you get at something, the easier it will be for you to do it, and you may not have to use the curve of your finger in the future, but this is for beginners, okay? So I would do that if you can. All right, if you don't have to, you don't have to. If you feel comfortable, that's fine. So I'm going to go down from that curve in the center, and I'm going to make a drop about that at that length or shorter, maybe somewhere between or about where the fold of your finger is there and the bottom of your thumbnail or fingernail. Okay, so I am going to make a dot about that length, okay? And that is going to help guide me for the rest of my petals. Okay, and you can turn your paper. And if you get comfortable with it, you don't have to turn your paper. If you want to just make the curved lines without using your finger, that is fine. Okay, so I've sketched in the outline or the border of my flower, and then I'm going to come in and add the lines just to kind of guide where my petals are. And then I'm going to fill that in with water. And then, like I showed you before, I'm going to tap in there in the center. I'm just going to tap in a little bit of water. Okay, and then I'm going to get a little bit more concentrated watercolor and fill my brush up with that and just kind of touch in some tones, and the water will kind of help spread it out. And let that set, and I can pull it out into the flower petals and maybe even outline my petals a little darker. And you can let that set and move on and do another one. Okay. I'm going to show you, let's see, I have a more completed one right here. And you can see here where I've done some side petals, okay, or a flower, some blossoms from the side. I didn't do this, okay, I didn't do the full on 5-petal flower that you see face on. I've done it kind of from the side. Okay, and then that's a real easy way to do. You just don't paint as many blossoms in, okay, and of course you leave out the center. Now these that have the center, and I've let them set, I've just went ahead and I painted in some flowers. I've sketched in some flowers here, like this one I let dry. So what I would do is just kind of paint in some water and do the same thing. If you have to stop and take a break, watercolor is very forgiving, and you can come in and continue where you left off, and it will still, if you need to blend out any lines that you let dry, or if you need to do any more pulling like like I showed you earlier, all you have to do is add the water and it will revive that watercolor, and you can pretty well just continue where you left off and not worry about it. And the other paints, you can't do that. Acrylic, if it's dry, you can't blend it out. There's some other, we've used tempera, that's a little harder. Tempera is a lot like watercolor, but it's a little harder to work with. Okay. So I can continue where I left off, and I can continue, like I showed you, I can continue with that technique. And I'm gonna let this one set. Okay, and then I'm gonna move on to some of the other flowers that I have let set and dry, like this one. And you want to look at the components of the flower for detail. It's always good to look at an actual reference. Of course, you're watching this video to reference the image of the flower, but if you have other flowers you want to paint or draw and make them look realistic, it's always good to look at a photo reference, just so you know how it's composed or put together. So I have the little, the filament and the anther that come out of the center of the flower. I'm seeing that. So I'm going to try to represent that in my painting. I want to be able to show the detail of that. So I'm going to do that. I have some darker tones here in the middle of this flower, just like I showed you how with the last technique, okay? And then this is a dry, I've let this set and dry. So I'm gonna paint more concentrated paint in this area. And I'm gonna fill my brush up. I'm gonna only put a little bit of water in my brush and maybe wipe out some of that water, and then grab some of that red. And it will turn into pink, but it will be a little darker. So I'm just gonna make some little dots. Okay, if you want to create some lines coming out, because that would be the filament, the lines coming out of the center, and the anther, they are what holds the pollen. Okay, so I'm just going to do little touches. If you want to add a little bit of orange or yellow to create the pollen in the center, you can. Okay, I'll try that. That is better achieved whenever it's dry, and you want to paint on real concentrated watercolor, so it's a little darker and it shows up. Okay, you basically want all paint and just a little bit of water. Mix in a little orange and yellow, and I'll test it over here on my paper. I'll test it even in the color, the thumbnail sketch that I created. Okay, I think that's gonna work. So just a few little touches. I can come in with more detail as I go, and after I fill in all the space, I can go back and add more detail to some of those flowers that I feel like need them. Okay, I'm gonna finish this up in time lapse, and then at the end, I will discuss what I've done to my artwork. As you can see here, I've continued painting the cherry blossom watercolor painting. I have added more cherry blossoms. I've also added a few more details within those cherry blossoms. I'm just waiting for these to dry so I can add some more concentrated color to create the detail of the filament and the anther. And on the anther, I'm gonna add some dots of pollen in yellow. I also have painted the blue sky in, and I'm going to show you how to create some sky with some techniques. So what I'm doing is I'm brushing on some water, and there's already a little bit of blue watercolor in my brush, and that's okay. But I'm going to brush on some water, and then I'm going to touch into my paint and add to the water that I've painted in that area. And then that is just a nice, delicate way to control your paint. You don't want to add too much too soon, and you want to blend as you go. Okay, it's a lot easier to blend wet watercolor than watercolor that's already dried. But if you do have to take a break and you have some settled watercolor that's dried and you don't really like the look of that, like some of these little spots where it's kind of dried and there's like an edge, see a little bit of a line there, I can just blend that out into the sky. And then as I pull around my paint, I can then get closer into like these little tight spaces that are in between the blossoms and the branches, and turn my brush to where I can edge right along the side of the branch. Okay, and if it's overlapping, that's okay. All you have to do is drop a little water and blot and clean it up, and hopefully not make too much of a mistake that you can't repair. So I'm just going to continue doing this in time lapse to finish up and fill in this space. I do want to show you real quick a technique. If you do want to add clouds, it's a nice little technique just to know for other paintings as well. If you want to add some clouds in the background that on the sky that you've already painted, you can leave it white. I might leave some of this space white over here, but if I've decided that I want a cloud to be placed and I've already painted, I would just drop in a little bit of water, just kind of add some water droplets and let that water set for a minute. And then you can come in with a paper towel and you can blot away, and it can make the appearance of a cloud. So that's just one cool little technique that you can use. And if you don't like that, you can come back in and paint watercolor back on top. So I hope you've enjoyed watching this tutorial. I do hope that you try it. And if you try it and you like it and you want to show it off, please email me an image of your painting and I will be glad to show it or post it onto our virtual gallery. So I hope you have a good time painting this, and I will see you soon. Please stay safe and have a great week. So long.